Welcome back to The Race. Now, South Africa's economy is taking some serious strain. President Cyril Ramaphosa says there's a plan, but let's face it, state-owned enterprises are not helping matters at all. Just think of Eskom and the dark times we endured earlier this year. Let's interrogate the research now. Now, if you look at state-owned enterprises, more specifically the future of state-owned enterprises, people who say the state should keep paying stand at 30.6%. They should be shut down. You have 23.9% of the people saying they should shut down. You have 39.2% of the people saying they should be sold to private investors. And of course, 6.3% saying they don't know. Kandipai?
I suspect also there's a lot of anger about how these things have panned out. I mean,
yeah, so isn't that perhaps the point, really? Yeah. That people are so fed up with how these, and on the back of, the state capture inquiry and the stuff that has been coming out of that inquiry, they are probably thinking these places are more of a liability, really.
Sure.
Can I just make one point? The really striking thing to me about this was that the privatization option was the most popular option across all parties, ANC, EFF, everyone else. The party most in favor of privatization was the EFF, not the DA.
Doesn't that tie in with what we were saying we were talking about a little earlier, just before we went on a break, which is that a lot of people see themselves as being potential business people. Yeah, I want to run my business, whether big or small, but I want to be, because not only will it bring money, but it brings a lot of independence.
Absolutely.
And self-reliance.
People want to own land. They want to own shares in companies. They want to own. I think it's also very much spoken in our Constitution, right? Our Constitution was very much about people and the individual's capacity to aspire, to do more for themselves, to achieve more. And I suspect that's what's coming through when people say, because they've been watching government owning, and they also know that government ownership is actually the ownership of certain interests and certain people anyway. So I suspect that that's where you find a lot of that stuff. And the land question is exactly the same. They don't want to own through communal structures. They would rather own themselves.
As individuals. Bill, take us through this one.
Well, what we did here was to say, look, it's not impossible South Africa will need to ask for an IMF bailout. Now, if so, the options we gave were it would be worthwhile complying with IMF conditions, because we know there would be conditions, in order to get a large loan. That was the first one. Or secondly, even we should just refuse help from the IMF because we don't want their conditions. Or thirdly, we need to be more pro-business policy anyway, so the IMF would only be pushing us in the right direction. And that was what the third column is. Now, again, interestingly, you've got 59% saying on one ground or another they'd be in favour of an IMF bailout. Now, we know the government is flatly against. And again, the general, views. It's important to say that some voters won't have understood this question properly. People aren't sufficiently clued in. But it's been in the newspapers quite a lot. So we thought it was interesting.
Well, Kandi, as Bill says, there's been no appetite up until now. Christine Lagarde, when she was here, said at no point did that ever come up in the many conversations she said that she had with Cyril Ramaphosa, the Reserve Bank governor, and other players. Your thoughts?
Look, I agree with Bill that it might be a very difficult question to grapple with. I think there are some economists themselves who struggle to understand what it actually means. But what I think is important, right, is that idea of it would push us in the right direction. I think we've heard these questions even when we think about ratings agencies. A lot of people will say, we don't want these rating agencies here. I think they have the same sense of we don't want the IMF because they are telling us what to do. And some people will say, we want the ratings agencies because they've helped us to push in the right direction. They are giving us advice. They are telling us what to do because clearly our government needs to be told what to do. So I suspect I'm more in line with the idea that people would say it would push us in the right direction, given that they are going to give us conditions and maybe we need somebody else to tell us what to do. It's an interesting proposition, but I still agree with Bill in the sense that they would have struggled to understand it. And of course, there's a lot of ideology, as I say, because, does the IMF represent oppressors, the colonialists, or are they bringing us something fresh? I think there would have been all sorts of questions under there.
Still ahead on the race, they are called the economic freedom fighters. But are they fighting for the same thing? We'll take a special look at the Red Berets right after this.